All right, so here's a question for you. What happens when a genius explorer gets too confident? When one impulsive decision literally ends the world? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the final chapter of Lara Croft's origin story. And I'm going to be honest with you, this game is a masterclass in some things, but it's also a fascinating case study in how even a legendary franchise can stumble at the finish line. If you're thinking about jumping into this 7-year-old adventure, or if you're just curious whether this is worth your time in 2026, stick around because we're breaking down everything, the absolutely jaw-dropping exploration, the story that doesn't quite stick the landing, and why this game feels like it's constantly fighting with itself. Let's go. So, the setup? It's been a couple months since Lara wrapped up her whole Trinity mess in Siberia. You'd think she'd learned her lesson about rushing headfirst into danger, right? Wrong. She and her best friend Jonah are hot on the trail of Trinity again, specifically their leader, this guy named Pedro Dominguez in Cozumel, Mexico. They find him digging around an ancient temple, and Lara spots the ceremonial dagger. She gets this gut feeling that Trinity's going to use it for something cataclysmic. So what does she do? She takes it, no hesitation, no second guessing, and boom. That one decision, that triggers the Mayan apocalypse. We're talking tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, thousands of people dying. And Lara, she doesn't even realize it's her fault at first. Here's where it gets interesting. Dominguez, who's actually this ancient cult leader named Amaru, tells Lara that he needs both the dagger and this silver box to stop the apocalypse and remake the world in his image. Trinity wants the same artifacts for their own purposes, and Lara, she's convinced that she's the only one who can save the world, which is kind of ironic considering she caused all this mess in the first place. The game takes you from the flooded ruins of Mexico through a plane crash in the Amazon to this hidden city called Paititi. And here's the thing, the premise is genuinely compelling. We're not watching Lara save the day. We're watching her deal with the consequences of being reckless. We're watching her realize that playing the hero might make her a villain to someone else. But here's where the story stumbles. The pacing feels disjointed. Amaru's barely in the game until the very end. He's this massive threat, but you'll forget he exists halfway through because the game's too busy giving you collectibles to find and side quests to complete. The narrative setup is fire, but the execution doesn't have the same energy. It builds this question, is Lara the savior or the destroyer? And then it kind of avoids answering it directly. And Jonah. Look, I love Jonah. The relationship between Lara and Jonah is genuinely one of the best parts of this game. He's basically her moral compass, constantly checking her, calling her out when she's being selfish. But because Eidos Montreal didn't write the previous games, some of that character work feels like it's playing catch-up rather than evolving naturally. The ending, though, when you finally get there, it works. It's bittersweet, emotional, and it gives you a Lara who's actually learned something. Just wish the journey there felt as tight as it should have. All right, so mechanically, this is where Shadow shines. The core loop is exploration, combat, and puzzle solving. You're running through massive semi-open hubs. You've got the hidden city of Paititi, which is absolutely loaded with tombs, crypts, side missions, and hidden treasures. And unlike a lot of modern open-world games, Shadow doesn't punish you for ignoring side content. You can speedrun the story if you want, or you can go full archaeology nerd and uncover everything. The traversal is smooth, like really smooth. Climbing, swinging, rappelling, wall running, it all feels intentional and responsive. Eidos took the foundation that Crystal Dynamics built and refined it. Every ledge feels purposeful, every jump has weight to it. And when you're scaling a temple while a jaguar is chasing you, that tension is real. Now, combat. This is going to sound weird, but combat is actually the weakest part of the gameplay loop. Not because it's bad, it's solid, but because the game heavily encourages stealth over direct confrontation. When you're sneaking through a camp, using mud to camouflage yourself against walls, taking out enemies silently with your bow, poisoning soldiers so they turn on each other, that's when combat feels good. You feel like a predator, you're thinking tactically, it's methodical and satisfying. But if you try to go in guns blazing, the game basically punishes you. Enemies are tanky, you burn through ammo fast, and it becomes a slog. It's like the developers were saying, yeah, you can do this, but please don't. And honestly, the stealth is so well designed that you won't want to. The bow is your best friend. Like seriously, 9 different bows, each with unique abilities. You can craft special arrows, poison arrows, fire arrows, incendiary arrows. You can rope enemies from trees. You can set traps. The skill tree gives you upgrades that make stealth even more powerful. There's also this really cool mechanic where you can use survival instinct to see which enemies you can take down without alerting the others. Yellow markers mean go for it. Red means someone's gonna see you. It's visual, it's intuitive, and it lets you plan your approach. The puzzles are where this game really proves it's a Tomb Raider game. The main campaign has some decent puzzles, but the challenge tombs, those are where Eidos flexed. These are entirely optional puzzle dungeons scattered across Paititi, and they're genuinely creative. You're using every tool in Lara's arsenal, pressure plates, water mechanics, ancient mechanisms, to solve increasingly complex problems. And when you finally crack one, there's this rush of accomplishment. This is what the original Tomb Raider games were all about, and Shadow captures that magic. The crafting system is intuitive. You scavenge for resources, plants, animal parts salvage, and you can craft ammo, healing herbs, and equipment upgrades on the fly. It's not complicated, but it works. It makes you feel resourceful without being tedious. But here's something I really respect: the difficulty customization. You can set combat, exploration, and puzzles to different difficulty levels. So if you love the tomb raiding but hate the combat, lower just the combat difficulty. If you want a puzzle-solving challenge but want to breeze through exploration, you can do that. It's player-focused design, and it's brilliant. The pacing of individual segments is great. You'll be doing tense survival sequences one moment, then you're solving intricate puzzles, then you're in an exploration zone, gathering resources and lore. It keeps things fresh.
Let's talk about how this game looks. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was already a beautiful game back in 2018, but Eidos Montreal and Nix's software absolutely nailed the jungle aesthetic. We're talking lush, dense forest with incredible draw distance, ancient Peruvian ruins covered in moss and vines, hidden temples that feel like they've been buried for centuries. The color palette is rich: greens and golds, deep shadows and caves, sunlight streaming through canopy caps. Everything feels alive. The environment isn't just pretty, it's tactile. You can see Lara's animations and model details up close during cutscenes, and it's clear the character model work is solid. Now, technically speaking, it's running through backward compatibility on current gen, right? The recent patches brought 4K support to PS5 and Series X, which is great. You're looking at 2 modes: high resolution at around 4K with some frame dips, usually hanging around 50 to 60 FPS, or high frame rate mode at 1080p with solid 60 FPS. The difference is noticeable, but honestly, the high resolution mode looks stunning despite the occasional frame drops. HDR support adds that extra layer of depth to lighting and colors. On PC, if you can run it maxed out, you get ray-traced shadows, ultra high-resolution textures, and higher frame rates. It still holds up beautifully. The animation work is quality. Lara's movement is fluid and realistic. When she's climbing and exhausted, you see it in her body language. Combat animations are weighty. Climbing ledges feels deliberate. There's this attention to detail that makes everything feel grounded. The only real gripe? Some textures on secondary characters feel a bit dated compared to Lara. Faces don't have quite the detail they should. And there are some minor pop-in issues if you're looking for absolute perfection. But these are nitpicks on an overall gorgeous package. What really impresses me is the art direction. It's the jungle, but it doesn't feel like every other jungle game. Paititi has this distinct visual identity. The Mayan and Incan architecture is respectfully rendered. The different biomes, from dense jungle to underground caves to ancient temples, all have their own visual language. This is probably Shadow's biggest strength: the world design. Paititi is massive. It's a hub world that grows as you progress through the story, unlocking new areas as you get more gear and abilities. Early on, you might see a tomb you can't access because you don't have the right pickaxe or climbing axe yet. Come back later and boom, you've got the tools and that tomb opens up. It's smart design. It gives you reasons to revisit areas. The side content is interesting. You've got a barter system where you trade resources with locals. You learn the history of Paititi through interactions with NPCs and relics you find. There's this settlement that develops as you complete quests. Not groundbreaking, but it adds some narrative weight to your exploration.
The treasure hunting is addictive. There are crypts, challenge tombs, monoliths with ancient language puzzles, survival caches. Your map is constantly revealing new points of interest. And unlike games that bombard you with marker spam, Shadow lets you control how much assistance you want. You can turn off hints and actually hunt for stuff yourself. But, and this is important, some of the side content is genuinely just fetch quests. Collect 5 of these mushrooms, deliver this to that NPC. It's not always compelling, and it can pull you away from the main narrative. The challenge tombs are the standout side content because they're full-featured puzzle experiences. Everything else is fine, but not essential. The environmental storytelling is solid. You find journals, letters, recordings that tell the story of Paitides' history, Trinity's involvement, the cult. It's all optional, but if you engage with it, the world becomes richer.
So let's be real about what doesn't land. First, the studio change matters. This is Eidos Montreal's game with Crystal Dynamics as support, and you can feel that sometimes. The puzzle design is incredible, classic Tomb Raider vibes, but the combat feels like it's missing that Crystal Dynamics polish. The enemy AI isn't particularly smart. The gunplay isn't as satisfying as it should be. It's like 2 studios made 2 different games and glued them together. Second, the narrative doesn't quite deliver on its promise. You're supposed to see Lara become the Tomb Raider in this game. You're supposed to watch her transformation. And we do see growth. She becomes less self-centered, more aware of consequences. But the actual defining moment, it doesn't hit as hard as it should. You're expecting this monumental character moment, and instead you get something more subdued. Third, pacing. The main antagonist, Amaru, basically disappears for huge chunks of a game. Trinity's threat feels distant. You're more focused on solving environmental puzzles and exploring tombs than actually confronting the villains. The story beats feel spread too thin. Fourth, some players will find the open-world approach too loose. If you want a tight, focused narrative like the 2013 reboot, this isn't it. Shadow gives you freedom, which is great for some, but it does dilute the story's urgency. And finally, the ending. Look, it's emotionally satisfying, and I respect what it's trying to do. But after everything you've been through, after all the build-up, the final boss is kind of a letdown mechanically. You're expecting an epic showdown, and instead, it's a pretty straightforward encounter.
So where does this leave us? Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a good game. Not a great one, but genuinely good. It's got standout moments, exploration sequences that are thrilling, puzzles that make you feel like a genius when you solve them, a relationship with Jonah that feels genuine and earned. If you loved the first 2 games in this trilogy, you need to play this. It's the conclusion to Lara's origin story, and regardless of whether it sticks every landing, you deserve to see how it ends. The exploration and tomb raiding alone make it worth your time if that's what you're after. If you're someone who values story above all else, manage your expectations. The narrative is serviceable but messy. It builds something intriguing and then struggles to execute on it. Not bad, just not transcendent. If you're into complex combat encounters and challenging enemy encounters, this isn't your game. You'll be stealth sneaking past enemies more often than not, which is fine, but it's not exactly pulse-pounding. In 2026, is it worth playing? Absolutely. It's readily available, usually cheap, and it still looks fantastic on current-gen hardware. The exploration and puzzle design have aged beautifully. The story, while flawed, explores interesting themes about consequence and heroism. If I'm grading it, exploration and puzzle design, 9 out of 10. Story, 7 out of 10. Combat, 6.5 out of 10. Graphics and presentation, 8.5 out of 10. Overall package, solid 8 out of 10. It's a game that you'll enjoy if you go in knowing what to expect. It's not the masterpiece its marketing suggested, but it's not a failure either. It's a complicated, ambitious game that mostly pulls off what it's trying to do, which honestly is more than a lot of blockbuster titles can say.